Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is February 8, year 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I will break from convention today by welcoming personally their Mobsterful, Piper Fogel, Corky Goss, Melissa, and who else? Michael Charlie, I saw earlier, Marcia Ezel, and did I say Corky Goss? If I repeated myself, forgive me. Yes, thank you very much for coming to this site here. As you know, I was put on the bench for 1 week. And if you want to have updates, if you put out a friend call on Facebook, which I recently rejoined rather, I'll friend you and then you can see if I have been moved here or there. And I post an occasional piece of information or link there. Also, I have the Patreon, and Patreon people are probably the most in sync with what I'm doing, both currently and into the future. I post a lot of supplementary material, PDF, sometimes entire books if they are if they're in the public domain. I will do that. And if I think it's going to be of interest to you, as well as select audio fragments as well. So anyway, I'm telling you this so that we can maintain contact here, and hopefully this is not going to be a recurrent situation here. I speculate, and most of you already know this. I speculate that I was put into the jailhouse because of the incredible two back-to-back interviews last week. They weren't live streams because of scheduling. I had to pre-record them and I live streamed them on Tuesday and Thursday, and there were huge spikes in views for which I'm grateful. And by the way, these two videos are still on there in case you're interested, or if you want to refer people to watch them. I think they're well worth archiving as well. But I think the algorithm was, hey, what's going on here? And what was going on was Kirby Summers on Tuesday, and on Thursday was Michael A. Hoffman II. So it rarely gets better than that in 1 week. I was just lucky that week, but now I have to, hopefully I'll be able to do this 3 times a week once I get the radio station going and I have help booking people, tracking them down and inviting them. And there's a lot of administrative work that's involved in getting guests. But you lucked out, and we had some incredible interviews last week. So what happened, instead of taking those down, and there was nothing in there that was bad in any way that could be construed as being harmful to anybody or to the society or whatever. So they picked something from the past. It was a Rose McGowan video, but most of you have seen it anyway. I have it archived, and it doesn't really. I wish it was still there. But anyway, that was the pretext they used to take me down. So I'll be back a week from today on the regular channel. But for now, we're going live. And believe me, this is going to be an incredible live cast. Not just a live cast, but an archived piece, because you're going to be looking at Ian Fleming, the author, the world famous author, and his most famous literary creation, James Bond, and he has no middle name. James Bond, you'll be looking at him in a different way. And for my purpose here, I'm interested in it because I want to understand how Ian Fleming has not only documented and fictionalized, but also in a way prepared the ground for what we now know as the New World Order. And I had a suspicion about this years ago. A friend of mine, I might have been still in grad school, or maybe I was a struggling academic trying to find a job. But anyway, it was a long time ago, decades ago, where a friend of mine down in Anaheim, California, this is in Orange County, California, and by Disneyland, well, the same city, good friend down there. We'd been friends for many years, and he was always interested in the world of intrigue and spies and adventure. He's sort of an adventure buff, and he was into, of course, to Ian Fleming, and I wasn't, because I the movies, I was a kid watching them. I thought they're pretty stupid and pretty infantile. But I wasn't looking at the films in an ironic fashion. And I thought the films were equivalents to the literary inspirations, right? The books, they're adaptations, liberal adaptations. So I was confused, I guess, or thrown off and lazy. I didn't want to bother reading, but he gave me this hardback book. I can't remember which one it is, and I don't even know where it is. I have it packed away somewhere. And I read it. I read it out of, he was nice enough to give me this book. He thought I would enjoy it. And I read it and I said, my gosh, Ian Fleming is far more a literary person than I had imagined. Because I grew up with those stupid movies. And, I said stupid, but they're not so stupid after all. They have a lot of ideological as well as aesthetic content, and the acting, of course, is superb. Sean Connery, oh my gosh, beyond 007, he's gone on to really, I believe, revolutionize film acting in a way. And I didn't take him seriously. I think he was like Mr. Scott, and he was a bodybuilder. He was like Arnold Schwarzenegger, not steroidal like Arnold. And he was not a right-wing fascist, so far as I know. But uh, our friend was by nationality, he was Scottish himself, right? Just like James Bond. And the reason for that connection, which finally the penny dropped for me, the reason of the Scottish connection, that's also, by the way, of Ian Fleming's, it finally dropped because since the time when I was a teenager or preteen watching, seeing these films, since that time, like you, I've been exposed to this whole vast storehouse of literature on secret societies, the occult. Now it's big. It's cool now to be into that, and that's part of the problem that we're experiencing. There's you've got your what's her face, Annie Jacobson, has written all these books, and I say Annie Jacobson because, like Ian Fleming, they're a team of writers that produce work in order to create certain influence on the political scene, the zeitgeist, political zeitgeist, historical, cultural. And Fleming is very much a part of that. But like you, as well as myself, we know now about the Knights Templar. We know about the Scottish Rite. We know about the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown. We know all the appropriations of this once occulted or hidden history. And you know where I'm going with this. It stands to reason that Ian Fleming is doing the same process. He's embedding his work with all these different cryptographic, and he was an intelligence, right? You're an intelligent audience, so I don't have to really repeat all the stuff that newbies are. Oh, did you know 007 was John D and there was a double O and Tubal King? Yeah, I know that. And so that's not what today's talk's about, all right? If you're a newbie, just listen instead of putting something down in the comment that I need to listen to so-and-so or watch so-and-so on YouTube, because those people are biters. This is original material that I'm presenting. Those people have been repeating the same material that I've been reading for years and years and years. That's what I mean. They're now part of the problem. We don't really need the censors anymore. We just need a bunch of numbskulls who just discovered the moon and said, wow, yeah, Freemasons, they're behind everything. Anyway, it could be. There is a Freemasonic connection in the James Bond series, the 007. Whether Ian Fleming was a Scottish Rite Freemason, I don't know yet, but I have my suspicions. And research and scholarship. I'm not talking about YouTube-y stuff and the people who write these books that have been ripped off from YouTube, right? And say, I'm an expert on the occult and cryptography and on the Super Bowl. And gosh, did you know that there's rituals that are going on right in front of us? Welcome to the club. But it's going to take real, legitimate, dare I say it, academic research. And by the way, that's happening. I was prematurely involved with this in the academic world, but as it turns out, I'm finding my tribe. I realize there's a whole school, literally a whole, it's called the University of Amsterdam, where this type of study was implemented in, I think it was mid 19. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but even in the academic world, this type of stuff that you and me were way ahead of the curve on that. The academic world is just now catching up. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I'm kind of gloating, because I think this course of study, this renewal of our heritage, when I say our, I'm talking about not just Europe, I'm talking about the Mediterranean, Africa, south, north of the Sahara, as well as southern Africa, right, south of the Sahara, Asia, Southeast Asia. It was a new world order. It was a world system centuries ago, and we're finding this out through all this literature that's coming out of left field, according to the scholars. But now they're beginning to say, yeah, these whole ideas of time travel, interdimensional portals, and wow, yeah, quantum physics. Now all you hear about is these people who've discovered quantum physics, right? So anyway, we'll be going down those multiple trails very shortly. So I'm very excited today. This is kind of a long-winded introduction to express my excitement for introducing this material, and it will find its way into larger circles. And when it does, you will know. You'll be here. You're a witness to the fact that you're hearing it for the first time live right now. So congratulate yourself. Why do you think I'm interested in people like Michael A. Hoppe? He's been doing it for decades. And then, as you knew, he had his mentors, and then they had it's transmitted generationally, and I'm doing the same. I'm transmitting it generationally. So, and by the way, this is not, and I'm sure the writers I'm looking at aren't doing it just because it's a parlor game, all right? Just because it's fun or it's cool. You know what I mean by parlor game? That's when you go in the kitchen and you bust out the Uno, the board games, Candyland or whatever, Monopoly. Those are, we used to call them parlor games because we didn't have a parlor. We usually played them in the living room, but it's the stuff you bust out on, the holidays when you have people over. You don't want to really talk to them, so let's play a game. Boggle, Trivial Pursuit was big for a while. Those are parlor games. But what we're doing here is not a parlor game, all right? And I have to remind people, not you, but people who say, "Oh yeah," because they don't really connect it with what's going on here. They're not connecting with the biocaliphate that has tried to eat the world through blackmail, right? Through bio blackmail. I call it bio extortion. All right. But who was writing about bio extortion decades ago? Yes, you're way ahead of me. Ian Fleming. Yes. Yeah. And of course, he's doing it in sort of a cartoonish, burlesque way. But if you read against the grain, which is what is part of the cultural forensics method, by the way, read against the grain, right? Or watch against the grain. If you're doing movies or YouTubes, always against the grain, against, what, wood carving, you have to say, go with the grain. But if you go against the grain in music, whatever it is, in life, if you go against the grain, you will come up with some pretty outstanding observations, and you might even be a better person for it. I'm not going to make that claim for myself. I'm just saying that through my own practices, through my own professional work, going against the grain is what yields new insights, new knowledge, and takes us generationally ahead. Otherwise, we're going to be stagnated in the forever present. And that's why I'm saying that even so-called conservative independent media, because of its popularity, it runs the risk of moving into a new age of stagnation. And we want to keep that pool of information. We want to keep it infused with fresh water and oxygenated, right? That's at least my approach. So thank you, my friend down in Orange County decades ago, for having me read a book against my will. And I said, okay, one day I'm going to read more. And so that time came at the end of 2021. And thank goodness for the lockdown, man. I've been doing such incredible, and so have you. You know, we were communicating here. People are making music, they're making movies, they're doing all kinds of innovative work here because they got to slow down and they found out they don't really need public education. They said, you know, if the kids are staying home, we'll just teach them ourselves. So again, one of those unintended consequences that the biofascists try to lay on us, and they're on their back feet right now. They might come back at us, and I think they'll attempt something. But we're seeing some good signs in the larger civil society up north, right, Canada, and all the other parts of the world, by the way, which aren't even being covered, of the rebellion against what Ian Fleming was warning us against. Yes, he was warning us through this pop fiction, Ian Fleming, because he had been through that. He'd been there, he'd done it, didn't like what he saw, and he got out of it as quickly as he could, and he went to fiction. But as you've heard, once you are inducted into one of these organizations, whether it's intelligence secret society or even a corporation, it could be a university, it could any institution. Once you're inducted, there's only one way they will allow you out, and that's feet first. You know what I mean? Like a gang, you're they beat you up to get in, right? And you can't leave the gang. If you do, they'll beat you up or they'll kill you. And Ian Fleming himself died. I think he was aged 56. Don't nitpick me now. He might have died at 57, but you get, you know, my point is he died fairly young. I mean, I have outlived Ian Fleming. Of course, I wasn't a smoker. I used to be when I was in college, but I was, you know, haven't touched cigarettes in decades. And he was a heavy drinker. I'm a teetotal. I'm not straight edge, but he was a heavy imbiber of distilled spirits, as you might have. Maybe it's due to his Scottish heritage. I don't know. Yeah, just the art of distilling is incredible, and that's one area that Fleming doesn't write about. He writes about almost everything else, so far as cuisine, food, living, luxury automobiles, high performance automobiles, firearms, ornithology, but he doesn't really write that much about the nuts and bolts of distilled, you know, spirits, which he should have as part of his Scottish heritage. It migrated to the New World in Canada and the U.S. as part of the mountain culture. Why do you think, quote unquote, hillbillies and poor white trash? Why do you think all that stuff came out from Europe? Because these people had not only the spiritual and the intellectual and technical know-how how to live independently of the state without taxation and without oppression and without representation. So they had to be reviled, right? So that's why, as I've been predicting all along, I think the world renewal is coming from, I used to say the British diaspora, the Scottish, Irish diaspora. I think it's larger now. I'll call it the Celtic diaspora, the Celtic diasporic peoples are going to help us. I won't say undermine. The New World Order will remain intact, but in a severely diminished form, right? There was always going to be some master oppressor up there. Just get used to that fact. The point is that we are resisting at all times, so we can retain at least a certain degree of autonomy. We're losing almost all of it, but it's the people of the Celtic diaspora the world over, because they call it colonialism, and not all of them were colonists. A lot of them were prisoners, right? Like people in Australia, or indentured servants. Michael A. Hoffman has written a book called it "They Were Poor and They Were White." Yeah, these were the Irish slaves who came to the U.S. and in certain cases were treated worse than the African slaves, because the African slaves were chattel. They had to pay money for them, so they had to take care of them so they didn't lose their investment. Whereas if an Irishman fell off a raft or something and drowned, what the hell? He's on his own. So anyway, you can see all the implications that are involved in a seemingly stupid and silly set of interlocking books featuring this hero. Some people would say a grotesque hero, not in the monstrous way, but a burlesque hero. And of course, forget about it. Don't come at me with, and I know you won't, but your academic feminist types, for them, James Bond is anathema. And I will take not just to be a contrarian, but I will take the opposite position. James Bond, the figure, as well as Ian Fleming, the human being, the person, was very much in tune with women. He was very sympathetic to women's position in society. And you could read, again, against the grain, all his books that have such famed heroines as Kissy Suzuki in a current book that I'm reading. I haven't done all 12. I'm at 11 and a half. I was going to not do this until I read all 12, but I came across a new book that cries out for immediate action, which is why I'm with you here today. And it also relates to something that Kirby Summers and Michael Hoffman were talking about last week. So there's some continuity from last week till today. But let me finish up the point about your academic feminist types. And I'm saying that, I know, not that you're part of them, but just so that you know that I know that they're off base. Ian Fleming, the James Bond character, you do not understand irony. And that makes sense to me because most of these people are dead serious. They don't have a sense of humor. What's that one? Talibi and the Congress, AOC, those people, man, they are such tight asses. They don't have sense. And the those stand-up comedians that run these shows, Bill Maher was one of them for a long, long time, but I think he sees that there's a sea change here. And they're beginning to relax. I'm talking about the comedians, not the congressmen like AOC, but the comedians, right, that we call libtards. And let's not engage in Don Bongino type and Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones type name calling. I mean, that really put us back so far as understanding what we're up against by just the name. Oh, libtard, he's a communist. These labels really are a distraction. They don't explain anything. But so far as the comedians are concerned, some of the writers that we're seeing, it's beginning to shift into something more manageable and something more recognizably American, in the American grain. So their gluteal muscles are beginning to relax. They're not so much tight asses that we're seeing. So let's use that space and let's welcome them into the fold, even though they're newbies to this type of discourse and this understanding. My university, those people there are probably lost causes, but they might be secretly, reading James Bond or some forbidden fiction that's been outlawed by that canon of wokeness, right? And even the woke critique is getting kind of old by now. The anti woke critique. We've heard all right. I think I introduced that to the public about 3 or 4 years ago on the Caravan to Midnight, I think it was, with John B. Wells. And now all we hear is woke, woke, woke. And I'm always ahead of the curve, so I'm telling you, let's not criticize the woke people anymore. Let's welcome into the world of freedom and liberation and human autonomy and anti-bioslavery. Okay, welcome all you former people who were embracing the lockdown, right? You Karens, right? That's another word that I like to see expunged. We don't care about those people. We're too busy for that. So, as I said, I'm halfway through the You Only Live Twice, and I have all 12 of them, plus a travel book by Ian Fleming and 2 volumes of short stories that he's done. And this is his Japan book, right? I'm going to do this on Thursday because I'll be done by if I'm not, I'll be very disappointed. These books are probably too easy to read. And I say that because don't read them too fast, right? Too quickly. I find myself kind of going on autopilot sometimes and missing all the tidbits between the story, the plot itself, the way it moves forward and moves ahead, right? Like an adventure story. I'm warning you, take it slow down and savor it because that's where all the goodies are. But anyway, next Thursday, I'll tell you about my own relationship to Spydom in Japan. I probably have more Japan experience than Ian Fleming. Of course, he got the 5-star treatment. I did it on the student budget and on my own dime. I didn't have a publishing firm or British intelligence paying my way. But yeah, and I keep knocking the world's oldest fanboy, Quentin Tarantino, for appropriating, Kill Bill 1 and 2, the Okinawan culture. I was down there. Here's one of my maps, my guidebooks. Many times. I told you I lived there for an entire year. And that's where I got in touch with the Okinawan secret societies. I didn't do the kobudo, the physical stuff. I was interested in the metaphysical, the philosophical and the spiritual traditions behind the physical. I guess it's called mixed martial arts now. That's Joe Rogan's claim to fame. Yeah, while he was getting beat up, I was trying to exercise my brain, my mind, while I was down there. And by the way, just incidentally, I'll get this on Thursday. After I left there, and a couple years had passed, I realized that all my minders, all the people around me, every single one of them were connected to the Roman Catholic Church. And I think they were Jesuits, right? Because that's part of their control is in circle. And they were making sure that I would only see certain parts of Okinawan society, culture, the ones that goes all the way back to China and India, because it's an island, right? They're trading with all these larger civilizations and they're learning their occult, their secret philosophical, physical traditions, the metaphysical understandings, and their secret sciences, right? So they were surrounding me. So when I say I was a spy, I mean it. I'm not talking about literally. And then I'm gathering all material, and it's just fortuitous. This came to the top of the pile in time for today's talk. This is a JR, stands for Japan Railways, East Pass. There's two main systems. This is the Shinkansen, right? This is what we know about the bullet train. This is the system right here. But if you're a foreigner, you have to be a foreigner. You can't buy this in Japan. You have to buy it outside the country just for travel tips, right? And if you buy it ahead of time, you'll get really cheap, unlimited travel all around the country. And the reason I'm telling you this, because I do the intel work, right? I went to Fukushima the year after it was targeted for destruction. And I took the JR. Here's the proof right here. There you go. There it is. This is no BS, all right? So do you understand why I get pissed off when people put in the comments what I should be doing or who I should be reading or who I should be interviewing? Baby, I have been there, okay? I'm not saying that I'm going to write 12 books like Ian Fleming. I don't think he did himself either. But I understand where he's coming from, and I live part of that life of intrigue. You might call me the international man of mystery. I'm sorry, that's already been taken, right? In that little burlesque, right? And that was done purposely to make it into a big funny joke, but it's dead serious, ladies and gentlemen. It's about the New World Order. Ian Fleming was dead serious. Ian Fleming is a stone cold killer. I'm not saying that metaphorically. He has killed people. That whole 007, he was not MI6 necessarily in the field like that, but he has killed a human being. I can tell. I can see it. And he himself was killed later at the age of 56. So here's my JR pal. I'll talk about that at some other time. So when I'm reading something like You Only Live Twice, which reads like a guidebook, this is published in 1964. This has dictated almost everything that you and most people in popular culture know about Japan come right out of this book, which was an intelligence operations. So when I was a Fulbright scholar in when was it? 93? Yeah, I was in Japan, Hiroshima University, 93. This one doofus, and I was wearing dark glasses, right? Because the sun, it's pretty bright, but Japanese people don't typically wear glasses. But he had prepared for his Fulbright year by reading, can't remember the humorist, some guy that, so this guy told me, some ass clown told me, because I was wearing dark glasses, he says, Says so-and-so, I forgot the guy's name, Michael something, who wrote a book about Japan. He'd been there for 2 weeks and wrote this bestseller. This is when Japan was the big enemy back in the late 80s through early 90s. Says, yeah, only Yakuza gangsters wear dark glasses. So anyway, the point is he's a Fulbright scholar, but that's his mindset. That's his perceptions of what Japan is now. It's expanded to sushi, right? Thanks to the French intelligence asset known as Anthony Bourdain. I broke that down in the previous talk, right? His father was with the Sûreté, right? The French connection, the whole French opium / heroin trade, which we'll get into, by the way, because our man Ian Fleming gets into it, especially in this book called On Her Majesty's Secret Service. He talks about the whole Marseille Corsican connection. Hey, why don't I just talk about it right now, just at least in brief. My friend and colleague, John O'Loughlin, was talking about the OAS, right? It translates to the French, the secret army, the right wing, post-war fascism. You thought fascism died when Mussolini was strung up with his mistress, or after Hitler killed himself, or was exfiltrated, whatever story you believe in. No, it didn't. It continued very strong in the post-war period. OAS tried to kill President Charles. He was eventually elected president, but Charles de Gaulle was also a general, an incredibly military man who went into civilian life, who wanted to break the stranglehold of these secret societies and these right-wing fascist organizations that kept creating conflicts around the world, right? Which would killing ordinary French young men and American young men and German, and all of them. They were all killing each other at age 18, 19, 20, 21 years old on the behalf of these cabals, these institutions, these secret societies. Sound familiar? Does it sound anything like 2022? But anyway, Charles de Gaulle, John O'Loughlin was talking about OAS and the Marseille connection, and the connection to the assassination of our beloved whatever you know or think about the Kennedys. I view him as a martyred figure, right? Martyred for our sake, martyred for the sake of democracy. I also view Robert Kennedy. Put aside what your party affiliation, whatever you may think about him and his brother running around with Marilyn Monroe and whoever else, but I also view RFK in the same context, and also John F. Kennedy Jr. And the other Kennedy relative, her name escapes me, who washed up out of the river recently as this lockdown was breaking forth here. The Kennedy, again, the Celtic, the Irish diaspora have been generationally seen as a very, very potent force against tyranny. And that's really what's behind my assertion, that it will be the Celtic, more specifically the Irish diaspora, that's going to get us out of this biotyranny of 2020 to 2022. All right, because they put themselves on the line and they have died in the process for our benefit. And we must recognize that. We must honor their sacrifice, true sacrifice for the American Republic. And by the way, Fleming was, just because he was critical of certain institutions within Britain, he remained an Englishman, because John O'Loughlin was making, there was a person there, was it? Yeah, it was his show that was talking about the distinction between the English and the British. Or maybe this is John B. Wells had a guest on that was making the distinction. And of course, as I mentioned before, Fleming is in truth, his bloodline comes from the North, Scotland, and maybe further back. Maybe his relatives are part of this pharaohic, that is, pharaohs in Egypt. Maybe he's part of that bloodline. That's what's so exciting about this research, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to find more and more about who Ian Fleming's bloodline really was, because I tried to trace it back in preparation for this talk, and I Granted, I haven't really sat down and looked at it closely because I'm only now beginning to see the enormity of the task that awaits anybody who tackles this assignment. Who is Ian Fleming? But I only got so far as finding out that his grandfather was one of the founders of one of the great merchant banks of Scotland that later went down to London to, work with the city, which most of you already know is really the heart and soul of the global financial system, the city. And it's now a tourist attraction. And as I previewed on, again, John O'Loughlin's, who is Irish American, by the way, so he's retracing the steps here, right? Um, you know, it's kind of interesting how these circles, just these connectivities operate. It's one of the rewards. It's certainly not money, but it's one of the rewards, the eureka, the payoff for this type of work. But his father, his grandfather founded this brokerage, merchant bank, I guess it was. And Ian Fleming was a recipient of that largesse, but he resisted it. He could never fully, even though he was a child of privilege, he could have lived as a dissipated playboy for his entire life, but he chose not to do it. And those themes, by the way, find their way, guess what? In the 007 books. Those are the little tidbits that I'm talking about in between the plot lines. So don't forget about the plot lines, who A, B, C, D, who kills who's chasing who blows up who, what secret weapon. Yeah, that's all part of it. But the real juicy bits are, right, these little bits of autobiographical, anthropological, sociological information and knowledge and insight, brilliant insights by Ian Fleming. And whoever else he was collaborating with. I'm sure he was working with British historians, top level ones, and their names were going to be revealed one day. He's working with probably the top British anthropologists, and they have led the way in modern anthropology from Radcliffe Brown all the way to the present. Why? They needed anthropologists to figure out who these people are that they are lording over as part of Queen Victoria's empire. And Americans later took on that mantle as well. So you have the Anglo-American anthropologists that have really kind of controlled the knowledge and how people understand and take advantage and control other peoples globally. And by the way, that's not me. This is from the book Weaponizing Anthropology or Anthropology at War, David Price, if you want to, and he is a trained anthropologist, right? But I knew this. I learned this in grad school. I was in comparative culture, which was a program started by a renegade trained anthropologist by the name of Joseph G. Jorgensen, who wrote articles and editorials critical of anthropologists who were putting themselves in service of the prosecution of the Vietnam War, right? They had done their field work, let's say, in what is Indochina, Indochine, Vietnam, Cambodia, and they were turning it over to the military to help the military vanquish the local people at the level of their culture. Does it sound familiar? Well, that's one of the reasons why I gave that talk on Montgomery McFate, because she's a modern day incarnation of a multi-generational, maybe 3 or 4 generations of anthropologists now who have used that type of information in order to control people instead of liberate them. That's what all science is supposed to do, ladies and gentlemen, whether it's the hard sciences, the soft sciences, literature, music, art. All human knowledge is meant for our liberation and our freedom, not our enslavement. But as you know, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used in that fashion. So Fleming was getting all this information. It was going into his novels, and that's what gives it such incredible spice, not just exoticism, but penetrating insight into power relationships between people, among people, and within individuals, because he was also a master psychologist. He really understood human behavior at the level of psychology, and he had, I think, a very good understanding of his own psychology as Ian Fleming. Let me skip down to his biography because I'll tell you a little bit of his biographical elements that he alludes to in the books, or they manifest themselves in the plot lines. I won't go into his military career, but I told you he's a killer. I don't think it was just restricted to battlefield type killings. That is mutual combat in the military engagements. I'm talking about civilian killing there, and now there's research saying that he was much more of a hands-on spy. He wasn't one of these Bletchley Park. Not that they were doing bad; that wasn't their job. The decoder people. He was a field killer. Um, James Mona, as I told you, I think that's one of the reasons why he split down to Jamaica at a fairly young age. And as I told you, he was killed at age 56. He said, no, you're still working. I said, no, I don't want to work. Boom. Cyanide gas, right? He died of a heart attack. Yeah, I know he's a smoker and a drinker, but still people live into their 80s with bad habits like that as well. And I'll tell you some circumstantial information why I think he was killed. And it's not from me. It's coming from, again, some reading that I'm doing in conjunction with Kirby Summers and Michael Hoffman. See, again, it's these circles that intersects with each other. I'll get to it in a moment. I'll promise you I'll get into the Montauk Project before we end this talk in 20 minutes here. But first of all, let me talk a little bit about his private life. He was married, even though he resisted doing so. He was married to a woman who had a title as a royal, as a Viscountess Rothermere. She's known previously as Lady O'Neill, and she had been married to this man that she took as a second choice because Ian Fleming wanted to remain single. He wanted to remain a bachelor. By the way, that's one of the recurrent. It's not a recurrent. It's like one of the underlying themes that runs through every single one of these books, right? It's drawn from his own personal psychology and his life. And you think, okay, it's just a selfish, male, piggish, sexist exploitation of women, just using them for sex and discarding them and going on to the next adventure. Well, I'll have you know that Lady O'Neill, Viscountess Rothermere, was also a serial polygamist. They were polyamorous. I think it's called. They were married. They were married officially. Finally, she got divorced to the guy that she really wasn't. She was interested in Ian Fleming. He's much more exciting, right? He didn't want to get married, so they did marry, and they moved down to Jamaica. I think it was in '55. I think he was not. Well, I know he was not the Ian Fleming that we know now. His career was just beginning to take off, and she was there. I don't know how encouraging she was, but she was there before he became an international celebrity as an author. But the point I'm making is that she too had this active sex life before marriage, during marriage, and even when she was married with to Ian Fleming. They had this understanding, open relationship, I should call it. And that is not uncharacteristic of the British bourgeoisie. Now, the middle class, the working class, they were eventually allowed to engage in such activity. But before, it was something that was reserved to the nobility, to the royals. You know all those stories, right? You know about Prince Charles, or their prince, and Diana Spencer, and Lord Montague, and and all that. Princess Margaret. You know all that story. But it's also characteristic of the non-royals and non-nobility, the British bourgeoisie, the people that had the money, and it was decriminalized, whether it's same-sex or heterosexual. And by the way, and this is what the reason why the compromised entities went into pedophilia, because these indiscretions that were once career ruiners, right? They were going to like sink you forever in banking or in industry or in the police force, whatever. It was going to ruin you if you had sex outside of marriage. But once that became, thanks to the swinging 60s, decriminalized and seemed, it's cool, like, swing in London. Then they said, well, we'll have to move to something much more dark that is not and once they decriminalize pedophilia, as is being attempted right now, who knows where we're going to go there? Is it going to be murder? Maybe so. Who knows? It's probably going to be surreptitious mRNA, the murder of the human soul. That's probably the next step. I'm just guessing. That'd be a good premise for a novel, wouldn't it? But let me tell you one of the outcomes, the material outcomes of this open type of relationship that Ian Fleming, the author, enjoyed. Remember, if you were watching John O'Loughlin, I said it's no longer the city of London. That's a tourist attraction. The geographic focal point of the international economy is the Caribbean. And that is my hypothesis for Ian Fleming having gone down to start up Goldeneye, his estate. 55 acres, I think. I'm not sure. And all you nitpickers, if it's 60 acres, good. You're smarter than me. All right. Because you know that it's 60 instead of 55 acres. So he started Goldeneye not as a writing refuge, because I told you he had help, right? But more as an outpost of this offshoring of the global economy, especially the British economy, where its focal point is in places like Panama, all these front banks that were later exposed just in recent years, ladies and gentlemen. We're living this history in the so-called Panama Papers. So he started he bought this, he built an estate. The home was built from scratch, right, to his specifications, no windows, very few. He built it very much Japanese style, um, and he had a great respect for Japanese system. I mean, he uses a lot of caricatures and racial slurs and whatnot, but forget about it. That's stupid. That's silly. He had a bedrock, really good understanding for someone who didn't spend much time there, just through these these whirlwind tours, right? But he had British anthropologists who had lived and worked in Japan for, probably since the late 19th century. In fact, it was one of his grandfather's countrymen who helped break open Japan. That's one of the reasons why, ladies and gentlemen, I'm part of this story. You think, okay, you're not Scottish, you're not British, you're not English, you're not, you're not Anglo-Saxon. So what are you doing so obsessing about Ian Fleming? Au contraire, ladies and gentlemen, I'm part of this story, because it was his grandfather's generation, the Scots, that went to Japan and Okinawa. Like I told you, I've lived there, right? They went there to bust open that country, right? And my people said, no, you're not going to do it. We're going to remain sovereign against you Scottish banker scum. And before that, because we got rid of the Dutch people that were trying to get into Nagasaki, and we restricted them to an island called Deshima. So I am at the center of this discussion. I am at the center of this research. I am at the center of this history. All right. I never really fully explained that here, and I think it's time, because Thursday I'm going to talk about my experience living and working overseas, in trying to suss all this out, to figure it out, right? So I am as they say in the history department, I'm decentering the historiography. I'm decentering the common grid, right? I'm decentering the conceptualization of how power works in society, because that's what I do. I'm the master of cultural forensics, after all. Who else do you know studied American situation comedies to figure out what the American psyche and psychology and the post-war American consumption economy of TV dinners and crap beginning in the 1950s marketed through television? Who was the first one to do that? Not Ian Fleming, not Eric Ambler, me, Professor Hamamoto. That's the genesis. When I say cultural forensics, I mean it. I lived it. I worked it. I founded it. All right. My gosh, I was not fortunate like Ian Fleming, being born into a vast family fortune. And I did not live the life of an international man of mystery, but I'm still trying. And thank you for giving me an audience. Not like Ian Fleming estate. He's dead, right? But his estate, guess what his estate's estimated worth is right now? 8 billion American dollars. In 2022, the Fleming estate is worth 8 billion American dollars. And not dollars, dollars. Dollars means illicit. Dollars means if you earn it the hard way, like you go to work and you punch in and you're making something. Dollars is you're screwing around with the stock market or jacking with some national economy or presenting yourself as a consultant like this guy Chang, Gordon Chang. He's a consultant, tells us how bad China is. He's getting paid by some I guarantee you, he's being paid by some arms manufacturer to create this huge paranoia and fear of China. Because you know what? What he doesn't tell you, Gordon Chang, this is all intelligence, by the way. This is all very much consistent with Ian Fleming and his world. What these current iterations of these propagandas don't tell you is that you can hate on China, but what they're not telling you is that the Republicans, the rhinos, have bills in front of the US Congress that's going to deliver $2 billion, $2 billion of your money and my money to these arms manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies, all because we're scared and hating the Chicons. Do you understand how that works? Do you understand how the intelligence works? Yes, it's very, very, very subtle. And I thank you so much for being here with me. I'm not signing out yet, but again, I want to express and I don't take it for granted because I can be taken off, right? I could be banned for a week. I can get a third strike. Who knows? So when I have the chance, I want to thank you for supporting this effort of mine and yours because I'm working. I'm not in your name, but I'm trying to work on your behalf, on our behalf. All right. By the way, while we're on hypocrisy and think tanks, as they're called, I mean it with derision. I spit it out. Think tanks, right? While I'm on hypocrisy, official, state-sponsored, and they're also a means of tax avoidance for high-income people. So not only do they avoid paying taxes like you and me, but they also get to reap billions of dollars from people who say, "Oh yeah, the Chicoms are ready to attack. We better give all money to X, Y, and Z telecom or pharmaceutical or jet manufacturers, whatever." But he was also, Fleming, very critical of the so-called charitable organizations, philanthropy. He knew it was nothing but a BS. And he made that a plot point in, I guess it was, what was it? Oh, as a doctor? No. Yeah. The Audubon Society gets into the face of the British because it's, Jamaica, this island, private island, very much like Epstein's Island, by the way. I think Epstein and whoever set Epstein up were following the Ian Fleming British Caribbean model. That's why I was making that point. On Macduff Lives, and no one's doing it. I'm doing it. Right? It's right in front of our faces. You just have to be able to read events and happenings and goings on, spectacular as they may. Oh yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein, Leslie. Yeah, you got to calm down and read and understand against the grain instead of being taken up by all the sensationalism and all the name calling. Right? Keep your head on straight. That's how we're going to get through this. But anyway, he called out the Audubon Society and Dr. No, and Dr. No, who bought this private island, and he had this strange sort of amphibious device with a flamethrower on it to kill the habitats. He said he was going to save the birds and the nesting areas of these precious roseate spoonbills, right? But no, he was destroying them. Does it sound like the activity of certain foundations that you may know of? I'm not going to call them, I'm not going to say their name. You know what they are, right? I'm going to speak in cryptographic terms, just like the intelligence people do. All they have to say is foundation, and you can fill in the blank. The ones that rescue Haitian children who've been orphaned, right? Those types of foundations, right? All right, that comes from, not doesn't come from, but I'm reading it Against the Grain in Dr. No by Ian Fleming. Okay, real quickly, and I'm going to have to carry this over till Thursday for sure, because I promised you an occult connection here, right? I didn't mean to tease you, didn't want to keep you like standing on your tippy toes for the big fat wet kiss, right? Coming from me, the international man of mystery, who has taken a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. That's me. I took those vows, right? Poverty, chastity, obedience. So far, I've only fulfilled one of them. Or I've only maintained one of them. That's poverty. Chastity, I violated. Obedience, I never was obedient. But poverty, yes, I've 1 out of 3 is not bad. Okay, so far as priestly vows are concerned, monkish vows. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much silliness here. Okay, let me just put it very simply. Ian Fleming knew Aleister Crowley. Yes, everybody knows about Aleister Crowley. You can't read a website. It's, oh, yeah, Jack Parsons. Oh, JPL. Oh, yeah, Moonchild. Everybody's an expert on Aleister Crowley all of a sudden, right? Agent 666, 007, the world's evil man. But very few people know that Aleister Crowley was an intellectual, just like Michael Aquino is an intellectual, not because he had a PhD, but because he studied global politics. And they used the occult and applied to geopolitical realities in order to advance the interests of their masters, the empire. Same way with Aleister Crowley and with Ian Fleming. Now, I alluded cryptically previously, just now, that Ian Fleming was killed at age 56, ostensibly of a heart attack, right? Well, get this, and this is the source, and I've confirmed it since that time. I'm not going to go by just one person's account. It's by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. It's called Pyramids of Montauk, and he has a really page and a half. It's not even a chapter, but it's a little section there that caught my eye. And he says that Ian Fleming was on his way to America, and Fleming spent a lot of time in America, as you well know, right? He was on his way to America in order to confer with some of these Enochian magicians. Let's see here. Let me read. Okay, I'll just read it here. It comes right from this book. In August of 1964, right? Ian Fleming, that's the year of his death. Ian Fleming was planning to fly to New Jersey and meet with another man in British intelligence service, Ivan T. Sanderson. Sanderson was more famous as a radio personality and as an explorer who had written several books. As a zoologist, he used to appear with animals on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Sanderson also embraced the paranormal and was probably the staunchest ally of Morris K. Jessup, the first man to attempt to find out the truth about the Philadelphia experiment, right, which is connected to the Montauk Project. Anyway, I want to get that out there. I'll flesh that out a little bit more. As you know, I'm interested in television. I have given a talk on The Tonight Show and Johnny Carson. I've given a talk on Joan Rivers, who had a falling out with Johnny Carson's people and herself was killed later on. I've given a talk on Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain. I'm a television person. Why? Because time and time again, you will find out there is a television connection, radio/television, and of course now new media connection to the secret services and the banking system. So when people's on Netflix, this Netflix, yeah, of course, it's a continuation of a system that was in place as early as the late right after World War I, like 1919, 1920, early 20s. And I mentioned how, God, in the middle of nowhere back then, now it's everywhere. It's a globalist city. Nashville, Tennessee, the Radio Corporation of America put a studio down in the Deep South. What was in the Deep South, right? Now, well, it's not really Deep South, but it's far enough to be, in the southern region. And then later, a whole country music industry built up around that. And we learned from who was it? Is it Kathy O'Brien or is it one of the other abductees talked about the country music connection between mind-controlled sex slaves? I think that might be Kathy O'Brien. I'm not sure. So it all kind of comes together here, and it's if you read against the grain and piece together these seemingly unrelated sources, and you have a theoretical perspective. I call it New World Order theory, because there are no theoretical approaches out there that really pull together all these different strands in a simple, elegant, and coherent fashion, which are the three characteristics of valid theory, right? This is new theoretical, new social, political, historical theory that I'm breaking out for you. I call it New World Order theory via cultural forensics. All right. That's my contribution to the world, not just the academic one, but to the world in general. You're not going to be able to watch Bill Maher or these other ass clowns or CNN or watch films in the same way with eyes wide shut. You're going to be opened. The portals of understanding and even intuition are broadening and opening for everybody around the world, right? It's opening, it's happening. Let's not let this opportunity to go unused. This is a golden moment for us. Fleming called his golden eye, right? Golden eye, it's the omphalos, it's the opening, it's the seeing, it's golden. So let's use that concept of the golden eye for our purposes. We little people, the wretched of the earth, the scum, the ants, right? The little people, let's use that, our intelligence, our intellect, our almost infinite creativity. There's only one source of infinite creativity, right? Let's use that in order to free ourselves from biooppression. All right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'll carry it over to Thursday. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this Ivan T. Sanderson character on television. We know, like, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and, Roald Dahl, Dahl. He was intelligence, right? Why do these guys wind up on TV in the movies? All right. Thank you so much for being with me today. I had too much fun today. Being put on the YouTube S list is telling me that I'm doing something well. And I'm so happy that you're here to join me and share in this path breaking information, this new theoretical approach that we together are pioneering, right? It's not just me alone. I get that feedback loop through you, the energetics. It just comes right through. Thank you so much again. Bye. See you next Thursday, God willing.